Alrighty, so now we move on to our next to the last item for week 2 on Thursday. And so you may have remembered in the welcome video I talked about there's a project 0. So this is the course project that it will be due at the end of the semester, but we start working on it this week and sometimes, and it'll be a couple weeks, but in other words, we're actually towards the end working on it every week because the idea of a project is to be something that you think about over time, you develop over time. Now we're going to start with just kicking it off by doing a basic page. Now, because this item is a discussion, the thing you want to say in your head is the discussion would be which repo would I be working in? Now, for some topics like these discussions, you didn't have a repo you were working in, but for this one you will, and for the next one you will. Okay, so when we're doing discussions, we're working in the public repos. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and open up the item. I have the item here. Okay, and then I'm going to open up GitHub, go down to the repos. Oh, there's my public repo. Okay, so I already have opened my code space, and here's my code space. And this is actually where we left off when we were in attendance. Okay, here's the URL that renders my README at this point. Okay, all right, so let's look at the instructions that we're going to need here. Okay, or what we're going to do. So what we're going to do is you're going to start building your main project for the course. That's what I said before. Now you want really the only job you have here besides building an index, putting in an image of yourself, is really to select your topic. And the thing I would say is to think about that this topic of your site is going to be something that's shared with the entire class and public on the web. Okay, so keep it something that you wouldn't mind other people seeing. And I think I talked about this before, but just a good time to reiterate that. So now we're going to open VS Code and make sure your public repo is open. Oh, actually, I need to take off of this because when we say open in here, we mean in your code space. But it is good to remember, and I will remove that by the time you see it, though, is this URL because we're going to need this. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to open a new tab and I'm going to place it there to remind myself when I need it in a minute, I already have it up and running. Okay. Okay. So now inside the root level of the public, you're going to create a new folder, W2. Okay. So in your public repo, right? And inside of W2, you're going to create an index file. And then inside of the W2, you're going to create a folder called IMG. Okay, so this is stuff we've done before, but we get to do it again. In this case, in this specific folder. Okay, so then you open that index file, and this is what I showed before already, is you can use that explanation point just to set up the basic code. Okay, inside the body tag, add the context for your project idea. So we use a heading 1, and you've learned this from the free Code Camp work. Add a title to your project, add a P and add a P tag, paragraph tag, and then write 1 or 2 sentences describing what the site will ultimately be about. Okay, so now find a photo of yourself, right? Change it depending on what size it is. I know for me, taking it with my camera, it's rather large. I don't specifically give you a size here, but make something that will look fine on the page. And then what you're going to do is save it into that W2 folder that we created already in step 1. Yeah, that we created up here. And then rename the file to be all lowercase, something like me, JPEG, or profile PNG. As long as it's all lowercase, no space, you're fine. And then back in the index file, right, you're going to add an image tag. Now I'll show you this in a minute. I'm just kind of I'm going to give you a challenge here to see if you can do this, and then I'll show you what the output looks like. Okay. Do that image tag after your paragraph to display the photo, right? And in this case, it's got a source attribute. Okay. And now it's time to publish. Okay, so in this case, we're actually going to open the terminal, git add, git commit. Here's your commit message. And then at this point, you should have a URL that we can go and look at. So I'll show you in a minute just how to do this. And you'll end up sharing this URL. Now, again, this is not yours, but all you would need to change here is that your repo name, because W2, that folder we're creating, will be added to the URL. Okay. Okay, so and then here's you're going to do a reply, right? So provide your URL that actually will take us to your new created landing page for week 2 that will show us the description of your project 0, both a heading, paragraph, and a photo of yourself. Okay, so now let me actually go show you what this looks like when you build it. So in here, I've created at this base level, right, at this root level, I created a folder. That folder was W2. Inside of there, I created another folder. That folder was image, okay? Now, in here, I also created, now I'm going to roll this back up because at this W2, I then created a file, the index file, okay? So for my index file, I did that explanation to exclamation tab to create all that standard content. Then I did a H1, okay? And then because my project is actually, I'm going to build, is actually about hacking my Peloton for writing Ruby virtual worlds. And then write a good paragraph, right? A couple of good sentences here about why this is something you're interested in. And then I ended up adding HR. This is a tag we haven't seen yet, but a horizontal line. You don't have to. And then all important image tag, you give a source, right? And in this case, it's very important the way this is written because when you open the quotes, then you reference that. In this case, IMG references that the folder, and then inside of there references a file, or in this case, a actual image that I went and let's see how big was mine, 350. So something around that target would probably be good. Okay, so now when I did all that, then I fired up my go live. In this case, okay, so I would move, now I would go to, let me make this a little bigger in case you can't see it. I'd go to that W2. And if my heading showed up, my text showed up, and my image showed up, then that tells me I'm good to go. Okay, so at this point, if I don't need to do any commits, like in other words, you should have done a commit already down here, right? But this shows you by looking at live server, right? This is where you start troubleshooting if for some reason your image wasn't showing up or there was some text, something else showing up. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop these over here, right? And I've already done my get workflow, so I'm good to go here. All right. So now comes the part, because remember, when you're in this live server, that this is not a URL that you would share with the course because we will not be able to see your live server environment because this is just for you to do some testing with. Okay. So what you're going to do, and I'm going to come back here, right? This is when you're going to take and this is why I showed you earlier, is to go ahead and have that up from what we did on attendance, because now all you got to do is add the W2. Now do remember what I said before, is when you're doing your get push, to push all of your changes here once you've looked at them to show that they work. In other words, do they render correctly? Once that's true and you've pushed, it might take a second for that URL that we've been playing with for it to work. But now I'm going to show you how we test it, because remember, this URL is now looking at my public repo. But what do I want to do? I want to add W2 because that's the folder in there. Okay, and when I hit enter here, if everything works, then this is actually what I can now share with anybody, and they will be able to see that same output. Now, here's the thing I would tell you, for those of you that have done any amount of this, it's so tempting to want to make this nicer. Okay, it's totally normal, and that's part of what we're doing in this course by first learning some basic HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, getting a template, and setting it all up. Okay, So at this point I have now, and I'm going to copy this. Okay. I'm going to come back here. And now what I'm going to do is in my reply. Okay. And down here, I could paste that. Now I'm actually going to, looks like I might, and this is where I drop in and go, oh yeah, it's interesting what it was doing. It looks like it was giving me, and this is always good to see. Okay. So what happens is, and I'm going to undo that just to show you something. Whenever you're typing or when you're pasting a URL into a discussion board, until you hit enter right afterwards, it actually is nothing more than text. But this is where we now have a bit more skill, right? We can actually come in here and say, oh, this is an aref. This is where it's going to go. This is the link text itself. So we could actually change this to be something else if we wanted. But for this purpose of this assignment, it's totally fine. Okay. So what else do you need to do here? And by the way, this is why it's good to test before you post in there, right? So brief explanation of why you chose the topic for this semester. Okay. And then I will update this. I should have done this already, but I didn't. One reply. But again, find somebody who has not had a reply to talk about. Okay. And so at this point, there should be a little more content, and then you are good to go. Okay. So this is the beginning of our kickoff of our project. I would go ahead and go over here, right? And I could go ahead and stop my live server, but I happen to remember, or I did actually close a tab. I could stop my code space, but I happen to know that the next assignment needs it. So I'm going to leave it open. But if you're going to come back later, then I'd go ahead and stop that. Okay, we'll see you on the next one.